Welcome to the Page Turnerz Podcast, where book lovers unite to celebrate the enchanting world of fiction. With your host, Paul A. Brooks. In each episode, we'll dive into the captivating realms of storytelling, exploring the pages that transport us to magical places and introduce us to unforgettable characters. In each episode, we'll embark on a creative expedition through the minds of seasoned and emerging writers to unravel the mysteries and unveil the passion that fuels their stories. Join us on this odyssey through the pages and pixels of imagination, where words become worlds and stories illuminate our lives. So, pour yourself a coffee and immerse yourself in discussions about writing, gripping plots, heroes and villains, and the sheer joy of escaping into a well-crafted story.
In today's show, I'm talking to Nick Snape, author of the amazing Weapons of Choice series. And in the show, we talk about his background, his series, and of course, what's coming next. Now, if you like military sci-fi that is fast-paced and full of action, you're going to love Nick's Weapons of Choice series. All right, welcome, Nick. Thanks very much for coming today. Now, you were one of our authors on our last Epic Sci-Fi giveaway, which we did just before Christmas 2023. And it's really good to put a face to a name and now a voice to a face as well on a video, which is fantastic. I really like to be able to do that. Now, before we talk about your series, the Weapons of Choice series, what I'd like to do is kind of delve into a little bit more about you as a writer, first of all. So let me ask you, have you always been a writer?
No, I've only really been a writer since January last year, to be honest with you. So before then, I was a head teacher in primary school and worked primarily with the early years children and with autistic children as well.
Oh, fantastic.
We had a specialist unit, so we worked with children who were capable of accessing mainstream with high levels of support, which is one of those things that I was very, very interested in, always have been.
Yeah.
So now my background has really been primary school teaching or elementary school if you're from the US, and usually working with the youngest children.
Right.
And I think that's probably where a lot of my interesting stories come from. Spent a lot of time with children, not only telling them stories and reading stories, but also getting them to work back and forth with me to develop stories.
Oh, right. So you were writing stories whilst you were a teacher as well?
No. I wrote a book a long time ago when I was in my early 20s, which I didn't do anything with. It was just one of those things that you had to get out and do. But no, most of my time teaching is quite an intensive thing. And I admire anybody that can do two jobs anyway, which a lot of people, not obviously a lot of independent writers are doing.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any way I could have thought of anything else but what I was doing. It's quite there's a lot of background paperwork and planning and structure within all of that. And as I moved on to head teaching, obviously there's all the management, budgetary stuff. There's quite a wide range of things that you had to do. So.
Wow. Okay. I mean, there's this impression of people, of teachers who like people who have nothing to do with teaching, that you get 26 weeks a year off. I don't think that's quite true.
No, I think I had some very supportive parents, and I think they fully understood just how hard our teachers work for their children. I think it was quite a supportive school overall.
Yeah.
And it needed that back and forth and that relationship to develop that understanding that they do work hard. And obviously I was there during COVID, which we had to be open for every day. To support the parents who are still working, and those children who were working from home. So it's they understood as well through that time how hard everyone worked.
Yeah, that was a horrible time as well. Did you get much writing done yourself during that time? I mean, did you get a chance to sort of step away from the teaching, or were you still into it hammer and tongs at that point?
You were into it hammer and tongs because you had to support. There was a and you'll see this probably within my books. I do have a mental health element to a lot as it runs through.
Yeah.
But a lot of those children, a lot of parents and a lot of the staff, were dealing with some very, very difficult times with their own families, with their own children, as well as having to work alongside of that. So writing wasn't such a focus there. Reading was. I did an awful lot of escapist reading during that time.
Like
People
what,
like
for
Evan Curry.
example?
I read a lot of Evan Curry, so the Odyssey series and
Okay.
the Archangel series. It was quite. Um, it was an escapist type of sci-fi,
Right.
quite that type of thing that takes you away, doesn't have to think about anything, and because it was a long series with side offs, it just kept you focused on something else, a bit of relief
Yeah,
amongst all.
absolutely. I think as writers, we don't generally do. We read a lot anyway. I mean, I tend to read a lot of horror, and believe it or not, this is actually I've never read any Stephen King, um, but I got my daughter bought me 3 Stephen King books for Christmas, so I shall be reading those because I like the idea of bringing two ideas together, one horror and something more sort of natural and usual, and pulling them together and seeing how they knit together. So I mean, I write sci-fi, as you know, so it's a
Yes.
slightly different genre, but I sometimes think, I don't know whether you agree with this or not, but when you're writing, I think perhaps I've found this with my Altered Evolution series, is that it's kind of gone from sci-fi kind of alien invasion into a little bit of military sci-fi, and it's going to go more into sort of sci-fi horror. So it's kind of evolving, I think. I try to think of it as an evolution rather than it just jumping from different genres. Do you find that yourself, that you drift? Drift isn't perhaps the right word. There's natural other parts of different genres that can come into your books naturally.
I think they have to as well, because if you didn't do that as a writer, you'd be straitjacketing yourself straight away. This has
Yeah.
got to be military sci-fi. I can't move away from that straitjacket. I can't think out that box, if you like.
Mm.
But actually, you should do that. You've got to bring in a wit. It might cross genre, if you like. And I mean, you've mentioned Stephen King, but The Stand is one of my favorite books. You might not count that as horror. So from that point of view, with the 7 books I've already written, and the 8th, you could say that it starts off with quite a first contact action type approach,
Hmm.
with no knowledge or background to anything that's going on. It's just drop and go, um, with no reason or behind or understanding of what's going on. And then it develops from there. And as you go into the 5th, 6th, 7th, you're actually approaching quite a strong horror element to the books as they
Right.
encounter um, a specific alien beyond understanding that sees life as just food.
Yeah. Oh,
Simple as
right.
that.
Okay. Yeah. Absolute classic stuff. So where do you get your
Mhm.
ideas for for your stories then? I mean, I follow you on Instagram, so I really love those images that you put up there of
Mm.
landscapes and all of that sort of thing. I'm assuming they're sort of local landscapes where you are. Um, uh, do you get ideas from outside? Do you write outside? And have you ever written outside?
Write notes outside. So
Right.
basically, I do a lot of mountain biking, a lot of road riding, mainly only when it's wet, and generally a lot of walking. And that's where the notes and the ideas come from. That's where the next development points.
Yeah.
So I write notes. I'll use my phone for that as I'm going along, and I'll drop ideas in, and then I'll go back and review them. Not straight away, because often you lose the track of where the ideas come from.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they'll fit together. The unfortunate side of that is often your mind wanders off tangential and you end up with another idea for another book somewhere
Yeah.
along the line, another series. You're thinking, oh, so that's jotted down as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of ideas for where the book comes from, I think it's the my focus is that I go with the characters. So I did in my early days as a teenager, I did a lot of what they call tabletop role playing now, but role playing.
Okay.
Um, and from that point of view, I ran a lot of games and I fed off the people that were interacting with me at the time. A lot like storytelling, a lot like you do with children in terms of where they take you with ideas.
Yeah.
So I tend to have a very gentle arc in place and then feed where the characters take me. So where the books have gone and where the characters have developed is more as I've written.
That's really
It comes
interesting.
that out.
Yeah, I was
Um,
going to ask you, are you a plotter or a pantser? I mean, I've asked everybody I've spoken to, because for
yeah,
me, I'm way down the pantser end. I find it very hard to plot stories out and write detailed outlines. And would you say that you're kind of sort of further down the pantser end as I am?
I am probably, yes. You would say 90% pantser and 10% planner. That's
Yeah,
how
yeah,
I would probably put it.
yeah.
There has to be an outline plan, but you've also got to see that outside plan might change as you're writing.
Mm.
So I'll often hit midstream, take a break, and then write down the timelines of the characters that I've got involved,
Okay, yeah.
and then see where that's going, and then go
Yeah.
back and make sure that it ties up. Because that's the problem with being a pantser, as I'm sure you're aware, is that you can lose threads.
Yeah, really easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the thing I found most difficult. But I think that's probably my planning background that comes from teaching, is that you do have to keep those threads. You have 30 children in your class, you've got 30 threads, they're all at different levels.
Yeah,
I only got 4 or 5 in a book. So, but you still got to make sure it ties up. So
absolutely.
yes, I'm a pantser.
Yeah. I
From
think,
that point of view.
yeah, doesn't George R. Martin, he calls us gardeners. So I think he's this
Mm-hmm.
architects and gardeners, which I think is perhaps a little bit of a nicer way of phrasing it. So what draws you to write science fiction, though?
I think generally, well, the first point is obviously I didn't start until last January, but it was that's what I'd been reading. That's what had
Hmm.
kept me going through over the last few years, and it was really where my mind was at the time.
Right.
I have written fantasy. I am going to write fantasy again, for in terms of things that I've done, but really it's science fiction that's kept me going. That escapist element, but based in an element of reality.
Yeah.
And then of course there's my own experiences as I've grown up. So I mean, I read a lot of Ray Bradbury, probably my favorite author. A lot of Heinlein, and I know some of this things that they're based in have changed. Society's moved on quite a lot
Hmm.
from that, which is a good thing. But they have started that ball rolling to a degree and made people think wider in terms of what's possible.
Yes.
So those things really are the solid base of why I'm interested in science fiction. And then I was one of those Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon kids. So the Flash Gordons in the black and white, and the Battlestar Galacticas and the Buck Rogers, they were my time.
Yeah.
And I loved that structure.
Yeah.
So those things drew me into science fiction from that point of view. And I've enjoyed that factor of it. It gives you a way of looking at what you do and why you do it. Um, other genres, some appeal, some don't.
Hmm.
I'm not my wife reads a lot of thrillers. It doesn't really draw me in. But then I read a lot. I used to read a lot of fantasy, don't so much now. But
Right.
that's something I'd like to try again, just as a one-off to see how that goes.
Yeah, I was talking to Martin Lejeune yesterday, the author of the McMurdo series. I know you know him, but we were talking about because he does he writes sci-fi as well. We were talking about research, and he was talking about a physicist who got hold of him and sort of was talking to him about his ideas and what the reality was and what was potentially possible, which of course he'd drawn on, which was a great idea. Do you have any specific sort of research techniques yourself? I mean, for me, Google, I just Google it. Really, that's kind of the easiest way. But then my partner JP Schoffel is a physicist as well, so I can run ideas past him, and he comes up with some great stuff as well. And you think, oh wow, that's really interesting. So, do you have a method yourself of research that you use?
Well, Google's good. I think I nearly got thrown off the British Army site through my first book because everything was structured around what was going on there.
Yeah,
Especially when I started researching to all the bases and everything else.
yeah,
Um, I have 3 people who are my beta readers as well, who have a deeper concept. So they're all ex-university friends of mine,
right,
so have been friends for a very long time. So I have one who is a very deep thinker, but very connected with modern technology. That's not where his PhD is. He takes me off on quite wild ideas that we then pull back and restructure and research. And if there's anything I'm not quite sure of, he's found that he'll go and look into it if it piques his interest. If it doesn't, it's up to me.
yeah,
And then I have another one who's a computer scientist and some real some computer software engineer who has a real interest and depth into that area, as well as a real literary background.
Wow.
Has a real love of everything from Shakespeare and up from there. And then somebody else who's really involved in the character development of what I've got.
Okay.
And then they've all got. Then there's a biology background in there as well. So I've got a lot of those I can go to.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, things have moved on for a lot of that technology as well, and things have changed so quickly. Even just writing the book, I did some within the first book. I started introducing something called a light wrap camouflage, so the ability to hide within and use light around you as a camouflage.
Yeah.
And that is, thinking I was looking at 30, 40 years into the future, which is what my aliens are in terms of tech. Nope.
Yeah,
it's coming.
absolutely. I use something called a bioshield that the aliens in my story use. Again, when I ran it past JP, and he's like, well, yeah, if it's not here already, it's coming. So it's amazing how quickly things change. And now with the advent of AI as well, it's fascinating where things are going to go. So you would generally just sort of use your beta readers and Google potentially just to sort of wrap things up, so to speak.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, because we're off world. I've made, obviously there's always the issue, isn't it, with faster than light travel with whatever you do in terms of science fiction, and in terms of whether you're going to go full hard science fiction or not. My story arc structure allows for wormholes, if you like, to get over that factor of it. But the rest of it is all things that people are seeing are going to be capable and that are going to happen. Despite I've had a few hard science fiction fans come back and say, well, what about this? Well, there's tweaks, but it's not so unthinkable where I place my future science within it.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about your books now then. Let's talk about the Weapons of Choice series. So so far, you've got 7 books. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And your 8th one, which I think you are calling the finale, that's out in a couple of weeks from now, I think, isn't it? 24th of January. Is it going to be the finale? Because I think I read somewhere that there may be a 9th, or I don't know. I don't want to push you on that, but yeah. So let's say you've got 7 out now for sure, and then your 8th one is out on the 24th of this month. Can you give us a sort of an overview of, I suppose, each of the books? So let's start with Hostile Contact, the first one. It's sort of, if you give us kind of a brief overview of what readers can expect when they pick that up.
Yeah, I've got my books here to remind me of the order, because I'm sat there thinking I'm going to forget as I go.
Now, flash the covers. Let's have a look.
I can flash the covers as we go. There are
absolutely.
So basically, Hostile Contact is really if you see it as a TV series, it's the pilot episode,
right?
Where you just suddenly meet a bunch of soldiers who are, some of them reservists. So basically, it's a training session within the Scottish forest. Quite a standard setting. I had a couple of people write back to me saying, actually, yeah, we recognise where that is, even though I didn't put a lot of description in.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, they're dropped into the middle. Aliens arrive, only a small squad arrive, seeking a particular thing. And unfortunately, they've had 300 years of light travel to get to this place, to get to Scotland, of all places. And from that point of view, they have not quite fully come across that space unscathed.
Or the rain.
so they're not necessarily an aggressive alien race, but that's how it's seen. So when they drop in, everything goes wrong. Obviously, it's a reservist session, so there aren't necessarily weapons that are available. Though there are access, but it's not what they'll be carrying at that point in time. So it's basically they're left with a squad that's left on their own. Most of the people that were with them have been taken out, and one of their numbers been captured. So that is the premise of the book. Okay. It's a chase from there. They're actually not the aliens chasing them, the other way around, because they're trying to recover their particular squad leader who's been taken.
Right.
So
I was going to say, does that lead then? Go on. Sorry, I was going to say, does that lead into Return Protocol then?
Yeah, during that process and that hunt, they find and discover a spaceship, and that spaceship is what obviously the aliens were after in the first place.
Yeah.
That spaceship has an AI. So we was talking about AI earlier, who instigates return protocol.
Okay.
It's been woken up. Its job is to go back to where it came from, and so that's the point when it leaves Earth. That squad is taken away, and forced to return to a second aliens planet.
Mm-hmm.
From that point of view, so return protocol. It takes place on the Haven home, which is the planet of the Haven people.
Okay.
And those people are, I don't know, where do you take it? So those people are the original aliens who had been on Earth. They had a purpose on Earth. I mean, in reality, what they were doing was taking Earth people and seeding them on different planets.
Right. Okay. Oh,
Right?
fascinating.
That purpose emerges as the books go on. You're always conscious, how much do you say, how much do you not, because in terms of interest.
Yeah.
But in terms of that, they are attempting, you find out through the story that it's an attempt to colonize these different planets. They are not particularly, as an alien race, very biologically able to cope with different environments.
Right.
So they manipulate the humans to change the biome of each of these environments. And the intention is that they would then go and take over those planets themselves. They needed to spread out, they needed to grow. And you find out the reasons for that as you go through the books.
Sure.
When they arrive in Return Protocol, though, they find that they've had their own biological disaster and the planet's been practically wiped out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they arrive on a space station, which is where the Return Protocol would have taken them to. And they begin at this point to find out that the world isn't what they seemed. The AI begins to emerge as a character at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah. And a very pacifist character, these are my people type character.
Okay.
And then you've got that juxtaposition within the book. So the humans who aren't particularly technology advanced have access to an AI who is, and can provide them with weaponry against the remainder of the Haven race, who are probably about the 1900s. So they have basic rifles, they're powerful, and some basic technology on a very hostile 2G planet.
Does
So
the AI evolve? Does it change? I mean, don't give the story away if, too much, if you can answer that at all. Does the AI change and evolve and excuse me, adapt to what's happening
over time? So we eventually end up with the AI being called Yasuko. She's taken, it's probably not exact pronunciation, apologies. But basically she's taken from her persona from a memory in one of the characters, Yuri, and actually looks up to Zuri through the books as somebody that she would like to be, or respects in terms of how they act and how they are.
Right.
So the AI actually takes on a personality which develops. It's a bit like a teenager. Starts off, completely pacifistic, goes to the other side in later books, becomes quite aggressive, and then swings in between until they find their personality within the books.
Yeah, right. Wow.
And then there's a discovery that's even deeper about them later on, which I won't mention.
No, absolutely.
But they are actually a major character in the book.
Wow, that's really good. And isn't it amazing how it's very relatable to what's going on in the world now as well. I mean, probably even 5 years ago, if you'd have mentioned artificial intelligence to most people, they wouldn't have known what on earth you were talking about. But now everybody knows. So it's changing and evolving so very quickly. And the AI in your story then looks up to Zuri, and Zuri's War is the next book in the series. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. Well remembered, because he started thinking, which one's the next one? Yeah, Zuri's War is the next one. And this is when they begin to realize they can make a difference. They've got all this technology. They've got access to an AI, and they arrive on a planet that has been attacked by a spore, basically, which is landed on the planet, has begun to evolve itself, and then starts to move, starts to evolve. So if you like, it's a fungus, but it's a very quick one. It's a mold from that point of view, that they think initially hasn't got any sentience, but as they go along, they begin to realize it doesn't necessarily think, but it can learn.
Yeah.
And it learns by contact with itself, and it's from that point of view. So you've got the cell structures. This is where I needed the biologist. You've got the cell structures that can transfer information on about what they found. So it learns that way in terms of transference. The world itself is devastated because the humans weren't particularly successful that were seeded on there. And so therefore they're very isolationistic. They've got very different views on how religion should be. So you
Right.
can see it almost like city states in a way,
Yeah.
who don't want to help each other. So they land in the middle of this, and then during the quite a devastating time, and act. They begin to instigate what they believe in, that they should be helping people, that they should be supporting people, and in a way become a little bit of an inspiration for the rest of the people to start helping each other as cities fall to my Bausch, to my aliens.
Fantastic. Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm already invested in the story. I really like the idea of the spore and the kind of fungus idea, of it growing, learning, and potentially taking over. That's fascinating. So the next book then is Finn's War. So these are the two main characters, Zuri and Finn.
You could argue that, yes. There is a background character which we've not mentioned, which is Smith. I'll talk about Finn and I'll come back to Smith because he's in there somewhere.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I think when I started, my idea, in terms of where I was going, was that Zuri would be the main character, or I wanted a female main character within the book. But as it worked, it felt actually for her to develop into the main character, a powerful character within the book would work better.
Yeah.
And you'll see that as we go along in terms of the structure. So Finn is probably the most experienced. He has PTSD from his what's going on, not full PTSD. And you'll see it's like any condition, and this is where perhaps my experience working with children comes from, and their parents in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Is that he's at that point where he is descending, and it's becoming more taking over his life. And he's close to being thrown out of the army from that point of view. And what he's doing at this point with the reservists was his last chance. He develops a relationship with Zuri. It's a core to the book, but it's not the books over time. And that's perhaps the light that keeps him going and moving. So in Finn's War, that light collapses. She's captured by the people on the planet. So basically, what we've got is a technologically advanced human planet, and they are controlled by 5 companies. So very much an in-depth serf type approach. So people give their time.
Okay.
They're paid, but if they go into debt, then they owe time back.
Right.
So that those 5 companies are very much controlling of the planet. Very capitalistic in nature, very selfish in nature from that point of view, and also it's the planet's falling apart. They've actually moved. The companies have moved away. They have their own space stations, and they use the planet, if you like, as their the way to generate finance, money, keep them going.
Okay.
While they live a life of luxury away from it, and they're very family based. So they go into the middle of this. Zuri is captured. It's their first contact with a technologically advanced civilization. Try and play the game of being involved in what's going on, and trying to connect, thinking the AI will be able to get them through. And they find out the AI can't. They might be clever, but they're not social in terms of societal understanding. Haven't got that nuance that's needed.
Yeah. That's like AI now, isn't it? Really, in that respect.
Yeah, and that's very much how it works. It's that from that point of view, Yasuko works as the AI works with one of the other characters, Noah, and Smith, to develop an understanding of how society works, how people work, how you can go to one and it'll be completely different again with another human nature, and then how you meet another alien, that would be very different. And you can't use a structural without it allowing it to develop and evolve itself. Right. And it's part of that process of trying to get them to see that, and as we've discussed, that AI creativity has to learn from something. It's got to actually take on aspects of what's around them to understand what's going on. So Yuri ends up in a fighting pit, which is what the prison system uses to reduce her sentence. So it's it's violent, but it's not. It's usually doesn't result in death. but she's sentenced to a few years, but unless she goes through this series of fights. One of those fights goes terribly wrong, because this is a low G planet, and they begin to realize that Joe is very, very capable because in terms of that, because obviously her muscle structure and everything else.
Yeah.
And that's when you find out the 5 companies are very interested in genetics, are far
Okay.
more advanced than we are. And from that point of view, we've got a perfect specimen that we want to work with. And so her death doesn't happen, giving clues away, but there you
Yeah, I was
go.
going to say.
And that's going on in the back. Well, it's halfway through the book, so it's bound to be from that point of view.
Sure.
What happens there is that the AI doesn't like this. This is her heroine, if you like. Finn certainly doesn't like it. So we then move from a reservist set of typical British Army into full-on Space Marines, or Space Commanders, as I like to talk them. And she develops space-worthy battle armor, and off we go.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. Love it. So
that's
Rebirth then is the follow-on. Where does that fit in?
Well, after the events of there, they end up in the next area. They think it's going to be a pretty fly through. They're hoping to get back to Earth, which was, sorry, we missed that. That was the point of return protocol, to find a map to Earth.
Yeah.
But here they discover an alien that's emerging, and that alien is based on it's quite a strange background, but basically it feeds off electromagnetism to power it. And feeds off of what we would call, if you like, the spirit or the soul of carbon life.
Right. Okay.
So it's if you like, space vampire is the wrong word. Think it more of in terms of mythos. You probably combine it somewhere between a bit of Cthulhu mythos maybe in there. It's very alien. It's the first real alien that you meet within the books. It's so different that it's hard to classify it.
Okay.
That emerges. They end up engaging with it, even though that they weren't going to, and they were asked not to by the people who inhabit the solar system. But it gets away. Maybe.
And then invasive species.
Oh, right. I haven't got that book. You see,
oh, you not got
this is the problem. No, I had. Lots of my books have disappeared in a van somewhere, never arrived. I don't know what Amazon have done with them, but they're somewhere out there, waiting. So invasive species is after Alien Rebirth. We don't have any connection with that alien that we find in there, but that's where the original aliens came from that landed on Earth.
Right.
And they came to find something on Earth that they needed. Their planet has suffered a nuclear war since, but also suffers from some very difficult bacterial effects upon the bodies, mainly from ticks. And you'll see that they basically brought animals and things along with them when they were dropped onto the planet. That's interacted with the things that are already there.
Yeah.
And it's caused them quite a disaster that's ongoing. So they arrived there, and obviously we've got a very intelligent AI who can then start working with them. But that book is very much about how far do you go to help someone? How far do you go to survive?
Sure. Oh, that's interesting. And then the final one. So I say the final one, Legion Earth. That is out. What's talk a little bit about that one? Then we'll talk about, very briefly, your last one, book 8, the series finale. So talk about Legion Earth first.
So Legion Earth is basically what happens is, if we go back to a Rebirth, during that period of time, the soldiers were cloned, but they're cloned onto a plaque. So it's an electronic clone, and used to control some of the battle suits we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Now they contain not just the clone, but also the memories of the person.
Ah, right. Okay.
Right. So during the end of Alien Rebirth, they refused to be shut down. So basically, they take a ship and they go off on their own, and they deal with another issue that they're going to be. But you can see them basically as direct clones with memories of the original squad,
right,
up to the point they were created. After that, they've got their own memories.
Yeah.
Um, they eventually were aimed to go to a different place, but ended up, when they arrived within our solar system, which is the next stop off, they saw the alien from Alien Rebirth has actually landed on Earth.
Wow.
So their role within it is as protectors. So they arrive back on Earth, and there they meet another set of alien marines, the Stratton, who were a second set who were sent from the planet we talked about in book 6, who are on that planet, who they see as invaders initially, but then find out actually that they're not. They're just stranded because they were there to find a ship.
Right.
So that develops as a relationship. The Stratton actually are very much in the book that's available free, the one we did in our promotion together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically details their time on Earth between book 1 and book 6, and then they emerge into the actual story in book 7. So there's a crossover in some of the content within book 7. And they basically fight this alien, or trying to find this alien, which is basically insinuating itself into our electromagnetic systems and to our into the life on Earth. So they've learned to be subtler than they were in Rebirth.
Right. Wow. Wow. Okay. So again, can you give any more away, or do you want to leave it at that?
Okay, so during that, no, where does it happen? Yeah, during that story, basically he splits himself off, so he's like slivers of him insinuate himself into our system. He gets into our satellite systems, he can invade the communication systems, and particularly the mobile phone system. And what we have is an event which happens, which affects a vast majority of the human population. So it's where basically you can imagine it as an event where you're trying to disable and drain humanity to raise up the aliens and his slivers, the parts of him that are out there, as well as some of his brothers, and that goes wrong for him and for humanity. As they separate out, they become enemies in their own right. To him as well as to humanity. So it goes very wrong on Earth at that point in time.
Right. So this is a huge story. There's an awful lot going on. What I like is a lot of what's happened previously is coming back into the story as well. So that's fantastic. So with your last book, then, Nemesis Earth, there is on Instagram, I just saw this morning, you've got a little bit of a cover reveal. So it's not quite completed yet, the cover?
No, it's there. No, the cover's ready. I work with Mibble Art to produce the covers. All of them have been done by them, which has been an interesting process from that point of view.
Yeah,
because it's my covers are not the most expensive covers that you can have. So from that point of view, you're very much trying to work within those boundaries that of how much you spent on it.
Yeah.
While still working with the characters that you want to be seen. Yeah. So once you've set your characters in book 1, I've got 7 of them coming, 8 of them coming across. It's keeping some form of consistency with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But they've been really, really good. They're a company that will feed back, and you keep going. You've got that month once you've made that payment to sort out the structure. So and been very happy with them. So the last one has its cover ready. And that's, the Nemesis Earth is exactly as it sounds. So you've got 2 squads. I've got my Delta squad, who are the originals, Echo, who are their copies. And they're off on 2 different timelines. Those 2 different story arcs, if you like, because one's searching for something, one's trying to defend Earth, and then that merges into a final battle.
Right. Okay. So don't give any more away. Let's.
What I can give away is that book is twice as long as the rest.
Oh, okay. Good.
I couldn't get to a point where I could split it into 2 books. It wouldn't work.
Right.
I don't like cliffhangers. I don't like leaving things without a satisfactory conclusion.
Yeah.
Each book needs to be. So the way I saw it was it's that 2-parter at the end of your series, that 2-part special that I've put together. So it is twice as long.
Wow. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so they are on Amazon. They're paperback and ebook, but I want to talk to you a little bit about audiobooks because you've had, is it the first two books in this series narrated so far?
Yes,
Okay. And they are done by, is it Northern Lake Audio that have done it? Um,
they are. We might be switching over to Fireside Audio, with
okay.
because the books are in between.
Yeah.
We've had a long discussion because my books are they get darker, and we talked
Right.
about horror earlier,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's where they sit.
Yeah.
So, but they are a subsidiary of each other, so it's not a particular issue. We're just deciding where that's going to go.
Will you use the same narrator? Will you still use Josh?
Absolutely. So, we've booked Josh. Currently I've got the first 5 books we've agreed are going to happen.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can do the next ones after that. And Josh has signed up for the first 5.
Right.
He's finished 3 as far as I'm aware, though we haven't spoken for a little while. So that should be coming out in the next few months, hopefully.
Yeah, I've got to get him on here. We've got to talk about it because audiobooks is that's such a massive element now to what we do as writers.
Yeah.
Is to give us that additional medium. And I was listening to part of it earlier on, and I really like the way he changes characters using different expressions. How he's differentiating the characters really well, so it makes it really easy to follow. So that's fantastic. What's the process that you use to go through that? Do you talk to Josh to explain to him what you want? You tell him who the character is, where they're from, what kind of language that they're likely to use, accents, etc.
Yeah. So basically, Fireside provided a spreadsheet, Northern Lake Audio. So you go through your character list on that spreadsheet. You detail their background, you detail their history, their education, their original first language, and their accent,
Right.
and then any other details that you want on there. So they've got that. And then you add to that as you go through the books in terms of the characters. If there's anything that they've got in terms of pronunciation, Bausch was an interesting one, which is in book 3. So basically, Josh sent me a voice note. We had to listen to his version of it. We sent it back. But I've also got to let him have the freedom because it's not easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got
Yeah.
a Scots woman in Zurich with a Tanzanian background. Where are you going to place that?
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of that, so I've got to give the freedom for him to work with that. Obviously, Finn is Scottish, but not as broad as some. It's that balance that they've got to find. And obviously, we had a few goes and a few listens to different narrators, and Josh and another one were both very, very good. Then I left it for the company to decide which one they felt fitted.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because as writers, we write a description or a basic description of a scene or a planet or a person, but without giving too much information because we want the reader to fill in the blanks, so to speak. So they develop the idea of the character themselves. So I hear what you're saying really with allowing Josh that creative flow to allow him to generate the voice of the character just based on the information that you give him and let him do that. That's quite trusting. And I think, as an author, we have very strong ideas of what the characters are, who they are, what they do, what their background is, and to allow someone else to do that's quite something. So were you happy with what he's done?
Absolutely. Yeah. I had the dilemma of, do I go for an English voice actor, which I had the option of doing,
Yeah.
or do I go for someone with an American background? And I do feel in terms of flow, I was going between the two, but I do think it works with Josh, and obviously his American background. He is not just a voice actor; he's an actor in his own right as well. On top of that, so obviously there's a creative and understanding element that you've got to trust with that.
Yeah.
But I think it's gone really, really well.
Yeah.
And he will evolve with the books, because I think that's exactly what the books do. The first book is very action orientated, and then they evolve into much deeper, more complex relationships as we go along between the characters. I mean, Smith in particular is one that you've got to get right, because his background is very different. We've not talked about Smith.
Not
Need
yet.
to bring him up. Sorry. So Smith is my my dead corporal, basically. So he is an AI human hybrid, if you like, and he provides the comic relief through the books in terms of his interaction with other people.
Right.
Most of which is a smokescreen for his own insecurities, if you like. But his banter is not a word I like, but his interaction with each character as we go along has levels that keeps the story going without it becoming too heavy all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
think you need
he's
that.
an interesting guy.
Yeah, I think you need that. As a reader, there are times, when there's as a writer, when you're going through the learning processes, show, don't tell. Describe everything so they can see it rather than tell them what it's about. I think that's great, but I think sometimes a reader needs that break from it. Really, do you know what I mean? Just to give them that respite from that constant picture making that's going on in their minds. So that's a good thing in that respect. So anything else that you want to add to with Smith? Is there more that you want to talk to us about with him?
Well, he's probably, I don't know, he's probably the closest to me. I think there's somewhere along the line when you talk about where do you put your characters into things, I think he's probably the nearest the element of me in there, I suppose.
Yeah.
But no, he's basically, his development is, he goes from being a human to being an AI hybrid to he actually takes over a battle suit, and then progresses on to being a full humanoid cyborg towards the end, with the option of taking on a human body if he wants. That's the power of the AI Yasuku that we're dealing with.
Right.
And chooses not along the way.
Wow.
But you can see his up and down about where am I going with this.
Yeah. In terms of having Smith narrated, what sort of instructions have you given Josh for that?
I haven't. So he will retain the personality of what he was.
Yeah.
Which is an English corporal.
Yeah.
But it will evolve as Josh sees it evolving, and you'll see the asides and the things he says will allow that to happen.
Excellent.
He's probably I think you've got Finn, who's quite an obvious character in terms of his direction, what's going to happen to him. It's clear, but it's predictable, and that's what's needed. He needs to be a core predictability, as does Yuri, and then it's the others that flow around that from that point of view. So where Josh will take that in his narration will be interesting.
Yeah, I'll say, particularly as he's AI, and I'm thinking Stephen Hawking going, I've got this thing going on,
No, he's not. It's you've got to see it as in being human, but not fully human anymore.
Yeah.
And that erosion could happen if he allows it to happen. So where does he take it? And that's the choice between the body and not the body, and all those things that happen.
That'd be really interesting.
It's his even though it's snippets, because there's such a background story going on, it's his sliced story. If you put it together, is probably quite complex.
Yeah.
Despite the humor going on.
It's going to be really interesting to see where Josh takes that particularly. Now, so before it's recorded as an audiobook, you've obviously got to write it. So let's talk a little bit about your writing process then. Do you, because I ask everybody that I speak to about their writing process, because, I'm just trying to, I write everybody's down and use bits myself. But for me, I'm an early riser. I get up early.
You're frozen on me.
And then I will sort of edit what I've written the previous day before I add some more on. And I aim for about 1,000 words a day on a good day. What's your writing process? Do you have a goal each day that you want to reach?
Yeah, so I'm probably very different to that in some ways. So I'm very used to, in my old job, so I'm very used to being in work. I used to be in work for 7:15 every day. So basically what I do is I'm up and I'm at my desk when I'm writing for 7. And I'll write 7 till 11:30-ish. Roughly, that's how it works.
Yeah.
And I'm aiming for 3,000 words.
Wow. Okay.
So I write at pace because I work better at pace from that point of view. And if I can keep that structure going, it means I can keep the story rolling and going and everything else.
Yeah.
At the end of that, I am far too tired to do any editing.
I can imagine.
So it rarely happens. But what I will always do is set the first line of the next chapter.
So you've got something to pick up on.
got something to pick up on, and you've got that feeling that you had when you finished what your previous writing.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah,
So
yeah,
it gives you that, because that's the emotional thing that you can lose if you're, especially if you're in an action scene, and you don't, and you know that you've done enough, you can't do any more. Then it gives me that basis of, right, where was I? Where was that feeling?
yeah.
So I usually write the next line or small paragraph for the next set.
That's
And then yeah, and then my afternoons aren't what they should be because
fantastic.
my brain is mush.
Is that where you go out and take the pictures of and put them on the Instagram?
Yes,
Because there's some great pictures
yeah,
out there. Yeah, that's
yeah.
really nice.
Yes.
What
I'm lucky
software do
where
you
I
use?
live.
Sorry, Nick, go on. Sorry, go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
no, I'm just lucky where I live. I've just got, there's countryside all around. So from that point of view,
Yeah, fantastic. What sort of software do you use then? Now, I mean, I use Google Docs for drafting, and then
mm-hmm.
Atticus for formatting and getting it ready to put on
Mm-hmm.
Amazon. What do you use?
I use Microsoft Word,
Okay.
because that's what I used to using for years and years and years.
Yeah,
Never really got on with Google Docs. It's do use it now and again, but not really for the writing as such. And I use Pro Writing Aid to help out.
yeah, me too.
Um,
Yeah.
I did buy it before it had AI written in the middle of it all. Um, they never used to use that word, which is quite surprising. I only use that for basically for the grammar and structure checks, but
Mm.
also I have a bad habit of using echoes and repeats.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
it's
so
good for that.
that's it's excellent for that. It helps me find that, as is my editor in chief, my wife, because I do have a habit of repeating words. You'll see them when you're starting to search for them. So that helps
Yeah,
me with that.
yeah.
Don't use any of the rewording at all. Um, and that's just part of it that I don't like. Everyone's different, but to me, that's not me anymore.
Mm.
So if you're reading my work, it's my work, and that's how I think it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so I use ProWrite Aid for that. I don't use Atticus. I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I might go in that direction soon. But at the moment, I simply use Kindle Create. My
Okay.
books are only available on Amazon
Yeah.
at this point.
Hmm.
I don't think I suppose I've started off in military sci-fi and gone on to more military sci-fi horror, that there's the options, isn't there, in a lot of the formatting things, to use lots of to bring in pictures and to
Yeah.
variety in things and all
Yeah.
that type of stuff, which I
Yeah.
think is important if I was writing in a different element of the genre.
Yeah.
But I think for mine, most of it's going to be bought on Kindle or Kindle Unlimited. Therefore, I keep it simple, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
and clean. So I
Yeah.
think Kindle Create that does that well, and it reduces the stress of getting things up onto Amazon as well.
Absolutely. I touch wood. I haven't had any problems
I
uploading
think
to
it,
Amazon, but I
yeah,
have heard horror stories.
yeah. I do think Atticus has got a really good reputation. It would definitely be my next one to have a look at if I do
Yeah.
decide to move on.
Yeah, I
Um,
quite like it because it's you can format, if format's the right word, you can lay out a Google Doc so it just imports automatically into Atticus, and it structures it in terms of scenes and chapters for you just based on what you do in Google Docs. So it's really good for that for me again, because I just like to, like you, just keep it very simple, and that way it's almost a seamless process for me in that respect.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can, if I'm right, you can write into Atticus as well as you're
Yes, you
going.
can. Yeah.
And I think if I do decide, I mean, that I'm going to go down write more complex books than what I write now. They sound complex, but that's because they're long. There's a
Mm,
lot going on.
mm.
Then it's something I need to have a look at,
Yeah.
because you'll have so many different timelines to restructure in place.
Yeah,
Um,
it is good for that, for sure. I think the only thing that I found with it, because I've tried Scrivener and a couple of the others as well to write in, and whether or not it's my system that I've got here, but I just find it's a little bit slow. It takes time to
mhm,
catch up, which is just frustrating for me. But that might be just my personal, as I said earlier on before we started, I'm a bit of a technophobe, so it might probably would be just me. But yeah, that's the only thing I would say about it. It was just a little bit slow for me. But yeah, I think it would work really well if you've got something that's needs a lot more structure and more
mhm.
complexity. It would work quite well, I think. Yeah, fantastic. So let's finish things off now. Is there going to be a book 9? All right. So closed question.
Oh.
Is there going to be a book 9?
Right, it's a close question, but I need to answer it a different way. I've left book 8. There is an ending, right? There is a very satisfying bang. There is an ending to that story. There is an ending to Delta Squad's journey. There is an ending to Echo Squad's journey within it as well. But some of them survive. So the question is, and obviously, so what happens next? So there is an opening there.
Mm-hmm.
Where it can continue. There are lots of the background to the Haven and my alien, one of the main alien enemy protagonists within it. Their backgrounds are not fully explored. So if enough people are interested, is the answer to that, then I could go back to it and I could write a second series, which I think I'd like to. I think I need a gap. I need a break. Write something different. But there is that potential there. I've got 2 things I want to have a go at, and then I'll look and just see, how's it doing? Are enough people buying it? Are enough people reading it?
Yeah, lovely. Well, okay, so the series that you've got now is all available on Amazon. It's paperback, it's Kindle, and it's audiobook. Some of them are audiobook. And they're available on Amazon now. What I'll do is I'll put links to your website and any of the other links that you would like as well in the video, so people can go and check those books out and get to know you a little bit more. And maybe once you've got some more work done and you're sort of want to promote it a little bit more, but you can come back and we can talk again. Would that be okay?
I'd be very happy to. Yeah. No, it's been nice to talk about it in this way. So
that's great. All right, listen, thanks, Nick. Well, let's leave it there for today. Again, thanks very much for coming on, and we'll speak again very soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you for joining us on another captivating episode of the Page Turnerz Podcast. We hope you enjoyed delving into the pages with us, discovering new stories, and revisiting beloved classics. If you're as passionate about books as we are, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback keeps us bringing you fascinating discussions, author interviews, and book recommendations. Remember, the adventure never ends when you have a book in hand. Until next time, keep turning those pages and let the magic of storytelling continue to inspire your imagination. Happy reading.